guys? Welcome back to the Of Stone and Clay podcast. Today we have ourselves a solo episode, a special edition Valentine's Day episode for all the wounded and brokenhearted, for all the lovers and the loveless alike. This is for everyone, right? Although here's one group of people it's not for. It's not for anybody that says Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, it's not for you because that's not what it is. This is Valentine's Day, so we will be celebrating it thusly. I'm excited. I've never done a Valentine's Day episode, but we talk so much about love and relationships and the heart, the beating, dripping, bloody heart. So why not? So if you're wondering what you're going to get in this episode, I think you're going to get a lot. I think we're going to talk about a lot of different things, be it struggling with a broken heart, struggling with breakup, struggling with being single during Valentine's Day, or maybe you're feeling inspired and you're in a fresh new relationship and you're feeling emboldened and you're feeling a new sense of like a renewal in your belief in love, which is beautiful. We'll talk about that too. So we'll talk about the spectrum of love. We'll talk about it all. This, as much as this is a St. Valentine's, I don't know where the saint came from. As much as this is a Valentine's Day episode, Valentine's Day is synonymous with love, right? Or at least a celebration of love, a symbol of love, a reminder of love. And so let's go there, want to give a little shout out to this necklace too. A wonderful woman gave me this necklace. It just says yet in tiny writing. And to me, yet, the word itself is a symbol of hope, and it's a symbol of things to come, things that you don't have yet, but you believe in, you hope in, and maybe that's love. Maybe for you, it's that you don't have children yet, you don't have a family yet, you don't have a spouse yet, you don't have a girlfriend, a boyfriend yet. And yet to me is a reminder that it doesn't matter that I don't have it right now, because I will have it in the future. It's this ever beating reminder that hope lives with inside of me. And, it just happens to dangle right near my heart. So I love that. So, we will answer some questions. My solo episodes tend to be Q&A based. I want to hear, what you guys want to hear about, but this time I'll do these Q&As on Instagram and I'll get hundreds of responses. And usually my episodes will go through a lot of questions. We'll probably go through 20 or 25. Today I want to hit like 5 and just go a little bit deeper and see what we can find, But firstly, I want to talk about this passage. So I just finished reading A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. And I did a little book review on Instagram, but in summation, A Grief Observed is about the death of C.S. Lewis's wife. And he got married a lot later in life, and their marriage wasn't for very long. She got sick and died, and it broke him, as you could imagine. And so this book is 76 pages long, but this tiny book is an elegy to her. It's a prayer. It's a lamentation. It's grief personified. It's one of the more beautiful things I've ever encountered. And I love when he writes about her, and I love his perspectives, not only on grief and on moving on and the tumult that is involved in that, but just his thoughts and his musings on love and what it was like to have something so magnificent, because that's why grief exists, is because we have something wonderful. We have something meaningful and beautiful and something that touches us deeply. And without that, we don't have grief. And so grief it has to exist, right? It sucks and it pulls us down into misery sometimes, but it has to exist for us to have the beautiful things. And so I want to touch on this one little part. So he's describing his wife and their union. And because it's funny, he actually wrote this with a pseudonym to start. And so he didn't want people to know it was him and didn't want to use his wife's name. So he just refers to her as H. So talking about their love, he says, for those few years, H and I feasted on love, every mode of it, solemn and merry, romantic and realistic, sometimes as dramatic as a thunderstorm, sometimes as comfortable and unemphatic as putting on your soft slippers. No cranny of heart or body remained unsatisfied. What I really, really love is this beginning part where he says, for those first few years, we feasted on love. We have to talk about this phraseology for a second. What does it mean to feast on love? To feast on something implies, well, to me it implies there's a banquet. There's a fullness to it. You can't really have a feast on a couple bites. You feast on something robust. And that's what love is. And you don't nibble at love. You feast on love. And you attack it from every corner. And you indulge it in every way you can. And you feel it in every way you can. Because love is all encompassing. And so what does that mean, I guess? What does it mean to feast on love? I think it means, when you're feasting on something, there's an insatiability about it, right? Because you're starving. You're almost, it almost is physically violent, right? You're going at it. But I love using that analogy towards love and saying, I want to have insatiable love. I want the person that I love to be something that I'm not just nibbling on when I'm hungry, but that I'm feasting on. It's really beautiful. And the other thing I love in that is he says that they loved on each other, every mode of it. What does he say? He says, they feasted on love, every mode of it. Meaning every single way they could, they feasted on love. And so I'm sure some of it was spiritual. I'm sure some of it was physical. Some of it was their ability to complement each other, to notice each other, to see each other. Like love can be so many things. I think sometimes we even get, a little like boxed in by the definition of the 5 love languages, right? We think there's basically 5 ways we can love. There's 5 ways to show love. There's 5 ways to receive love. And I was actually talking to a therapist on this show maybe 6 months ago. And she's like, yeah, the love languages are great. They're useful. They're helpful to know. It's helpful to know if your partner likes receiving gifts and that means a lot to them. She's like, the truth is there's thousands of love languages. There's innumerable ways that we can show love and we can feast on love, every mode of it. And I love that. I love that. I love the idea that we can feast on love and we can show love in as many ways as we can think of. It doesn't need to be in 5 ways, in 5 capacities, in 5 modes. It's like love is love is everything. So that means we can come at it from every single angle. So feast on love, you know? And here's the thing. During this Valentine's Day season, maybe you find yourself in a marriage that is struggling. Maybe you find yourself in a separation. Maybe you're recently broken up with. Maybe you recently broke somebody's heart. Two different kinds of pain. Maybe you're deeply, deeply and utterly alone. Maybe you recently gave up hope. Maybe you recently had a resurgence of hope. Like Valentine's Day finds us in every spot of the human condition, you know? And so that brings me to my first question that I knew somebody would ask, but they said, any advice for dealing with this holiday, dealing with this day as a single person, you know? And again, a single person can find themselves anywhere on the spectrum of emotion. You know, maybe for you, this holiday doesn't really mean much. Maybe for you, it means everything because you just lost somebody and you've celebrated Valentine's Days with them before. And maybe this day is a really jarring reminder that you're lonely. It's a really jarring reminder that you don't have anybody. Or maybe your relationship, maybe you're in a situationship and there's nothing defined about it yet. And there's some insecurity there and there's some anxiousness there. And this holiday just sort of underscores it all. You know, maybe that's hard for you. I'll tell you my own position, okay? For myself, Valentine's Day, for whatever reason, has just never been a big deal. It hasn't struck me and hasn't been a thing that has caused me really much pain. I think, I mean, there's been Valentine's Days that I've spent completely by myself with, you know, no plans, didn't hang with friends, didn't do some Palentine's Day or some guy's night, just chilled at home, watched Friends, or, you know, played Wordscape on my phone in the fetal position while I ate jalapeno flavored Cheetos, you know, could have been that. But it never, I don't know, it just never, to me, Valentine's Day being a day to celebrate couples felt arbitrary, you know. It felt like, okay, this is a holiday and it's great, but it kind of just was invented, you know. There's, you know, and you can go back to the historicity of the holiday, but to me it still feels arbitrary. It feels like, all right, we came up with this day to celebrate nationwide, and as a couple you're expected to go out, you're expected to celebrate, you're expected to maybe exchange gifts, you know. And to me, I'll tell you a really cool thing. I think this is why it never felt like, you know, being single on Valentine's Day never felt like a slap in the face. It never felt like this is a hard day for me. I think part of it is because growing up, my mom would give me and the kids little gifts on Valentine's Day. It was like, it was kind of like Easter. Like, I don't know that we got stuff in baskets, but we just got, you know, not a ton of stuff. It wasn't like Christmas, but we just got a little trinket or some candy or something. And so in a really cool way, Valentine's Day wasn't about just couples. It was about love, you know? And it's funny, even in elementary school, everybody's exchanging heart-shaped candy and you give each other little Valentines and all these things. And it's not, in elementary school, it's not about couples, even though you might think a girl's cute and so you ask her to be your Valentine, and that doesn't mean anything. But it's not about couples. It's just about love. And I think as we get older, that sort of dissipates and Valentine's Day becomes about what you don't have and what you're missing and what you wish you had. And I don't think it needs to be like that, and it's easier said than done, right? My experience has made it that way for me. But if Valentine's Day is especially hard for you and it feels like a reminder that you're extra lonely, try to take a step back and be like, I'm not more single than I was yesterday. I'm not extra single. It's just getting maybe it's getting shoved in my face a little bit more, And I can, I feel that way a little bit during Christmas, I think, because Christmas is so much about families and it's so centered on children. And when you don't have anybody, you're just kind of like, all right, well, I'm here. I'm here, guys. It wouldn't really be a big deal if I wasn't here, and that can feel really lonely. But yeah, I would look at Valentine's Day as just another day, really. Don't let the calendar trigger you. The only thing that really makes it Valentine's Day is the calendar. An arbitrary date in a long life, and it happens once a year. It's just, I wouldn't give it that much credence. It's also it's the shortest month of the year, so it's not that important. But my advice, if you're lonely, is to not feel bad about it. You don't need to feel bad about being lonely. You don't need to, you don't need to view it as a tragedy, right? You can view it as, you know what? I'm really lonely. And yeah, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but I am seeing every couple post on Instagram today, and I'm just seeing how happy everyone is, and it's a reminder that I'm fairly unhappy and fairly unsatisfied. And that's okay, man. Just sit in that for a minute. Feel some of the sadness. But sadness is informative. Sadness tells you something. Sadness tells you, okay, I'm feeling something for a reason. And in this case, the reason is because you're bereft, you're without something really special, and you crave something really special. You crave being with somebody that gets you and sees you and wants you. And that is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to belittle yourself for. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's simply a feeling. It's like if I burn my finger on the stove, I'm not embarrassed about that. It hurts. And that's a feeling. I'm not embarrassed that my finger hurts. Of course it hurts. I burned it, right? So if I'm lonely and I don't have a partner and I wish I did, and that hurts me, that hurts my soul, why would I be embarrassed? Of course my heart hurts. We're not meant to be alone, especially for protracted periods of time. It's not good for man to be alone. And so, to me, I think sometimes we really exacerbate the agony within ourselves by toppling on, throwing on top of ourselves additional shame, additional embarrassment, sprinkle on some extra, like sadness because you're sad. It's just not helpful. And so my advice, if you're lonely on Valentine's Day, just be lonely on Valentine's Day. That's okay. You were probably a little bit lonely yesterday. You'll probably be a little bit lonely tomorrow. And that's fine. But also, when you're lonely, what is something you can for sure do to help is go help somebody be a little bit less lonely. Reach out to another single friend that is in the freaking trenches. Extend a hand and just because you're with somebody else doesn't mean you're not lonely deep down inside, but I promise you're less lonely, Um, it's a really good question. Okay, nobody asked this, but maybe on the opposite side of this question, maybe Valentine's Day is hard because your relationship is struggling and it's not doing well. It's not going in the direction you want. It's fractured. It's broken. It's this day is a reminder that your relationship is either spiraling or doomed, or that it's just bad and you don't have the courage to leave, or you don't have the courage to change it, or to communicate your desires or your feelings, or to articulate your boundaries. Maybe this day just feels like a slap in the face because your partner isn't going to celebrate you like you deserve, and your partner isn't going to give you the things that you want. And the thing is, the chocolate, the teddy bears, the balloons, those aren't the things you really want. If your partner doesn't give you those things on Valentine's Day, that's not what really hurts. You know, you can go buy yourself chocolate. You can go buy yourself a teddy bear. The chocolate will taste the same, right? It's the sentiment that they care and that there's effort there, that they want to make you happy, right? And so, for sure, Valentine's Day could be tougher for some people that are in relationships than people that are single. And I would say my advice is a little bit different than just sit in the disappointment, sit in the pain. Maybe do that a little, but maybe it's an opportunity to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm unhappy in this relationship. And so something needs to change. And that's really hard. And it's potentially a really hard conversation with your partner. It requires immense change, maybe from them, but maybe from you. And that's really scary. But if you're in a relationship and this day feels triggering for some reason, just ask yourself why. You know, the answer is probably a little simpler than you think. You know, and if you're, sometimes we're in these bad relationships and we don't leave not because we're scared to leave or we're scared to hurt our partner, but because we truly don't believe that we deserve anything better. And it breaks my heart anytime that I see that or I hear that. A lot of times you don't hear it because people won't be that self-honest, but you can see it. And it absolutely breaks my heart to know that people are being mistreated. They're in relationships that aren't serving them anymore, but they stay because they think, wow, this is the best I can get. This is better than being by myself. This is better than waking up and not having anybody next to me. I just don't think that's true, you know? I think part of the blessing of being single for a long time, much longer than I've ever wanted or anticipated, is if you're lucky and if you've done some of the work required, there arrives a certain level of peace in being by yourself, and not a certain acceptance that you'll always be alone, but you accept the current state, and you know that it's not that bad. You know, being alone is hard for a lot of reasons, but being in a relationship that is causing misery is the real hell. And you can ask anybody that's been divorced or has gotten out of a bad relationship and is single again, they'll tell you. They're like, yeah, being single's tough, but being married to somebody that slowly crushed my soul, that's the real hell. That's the real fiery, red hot hell that exists. Being by yourself is hard. But yeah, being in a relationship that is unserving and ungenerous and ultimately unloving, it's like crawling through glass every day just to get across the room. It's not worth it. This is an interesting question. Would you ever get back with an ex? I think this question is spurred by something about this holiday and Christmas, New Year's, and birthdays, I would say. We get the urge to text the ex. We get the urge to reach back out, to rekindle, because our mind just goes there. Everybody's maybe a little bit more sensitive, feeling a little more nostalgic. And so we think, man, maybe this is a time, maybe my ex is thinking about me. Not the case for me, I would guess. But okay, so as a personal question, would I get back with an ex? This is a really hard question because I think sometimes our assumption is that our ex is still the same person they were when we dated them. And, if we broke up 3 days ago, maybe that's the case. But more often than not, they're a completely different person now. And you're a completely different person. And so if you met again, if you reconnected, maybe it would be right. Maybe it would be way worse than it ever was. Maybe it would be way better than it ever was. So for me, my answer is kind of, I don't know. I would have to see, But with a very small number of them, probably 2, maybe 3, I would certainly entertain it because I loved them. I love them to the point of sneezing. And I didn't stop loving them for any reason other than it was no longer appropriate, But I'm certain that those girls have changed fundamentally. I'm sure they've changed in ways I can't even imagine. And I've changed in ways that I bet they couldn't really wrap their head around. And so, because I know, the girls I'm thinking about, because I know how amazing they are and how amazing they were, I think I'd be a fool to not consider it. But these few girls I'm mentioning, they never did anything really hurtful to me besides rejecting me, besides jettisoning. They jettisoned our relationship, right? Maybe I shouldn't use a word if I don't know how to use it. But besides ultimately not wanting to be with me, there was no ground offense. And so there was no toxicity. There was no reason for me to say, oh, if they come crawling back, I'm not going to get involved. That would just be my ego talking. And so my ego can go to lunch. I don't care. But I'm also not going to assume that if any of them came back into my life that they would be the same versions that exist in my head, So don't fall under the trap that if you just got another chance with your ex, or if your ex saw you, if they could see you now, if they could see how evolved you are, how much you've progressed, then things would be different. Or, if they could just heal a little bit, then things could be different, because you just don't know. There's just too many variables. And so there's certainly some exes of mine that I would not get back together with, because hindsight has revealed to me that we were never compatible to begin with, or that I wasn't that happy anyway, and that's why we broke up. But with the precious few, I'd open my heart to it. But luckily, in my own case, I think there's a better chance that I end my life on Mars than getting back with any of them. Because, they broke up with me for a reason. And whatever those reasons were, I might kind of understand, I might have an idea, but ultimately I have to take them at their word, right? I have to believe their actions, and their actions have shown me that they ain't coming back. So to me, it's a question that I don't think you really have to concern yourself with. I think sometimes we're trying to move on and we're like, yeah, but what if my ex comes back? And it's like, well, if your ex is a great person and an evolved person and a really beautiful soul, be open to it. Why not? Right? But if you broke up for a reason because their insides are rotten and they did you dirty and they hurt you, you can forgive them, but you don't need to let them back into your life, But I tell people, like, cross that bridge when it comes, because the odds are it's not coming. So I think a lot of times we waste a decent amount of energy fantasizing over our ex coming back into our life. And it just, yeah, deal with it when it happens. Okay, this is an interesting question. They said, how do I get over my anxious attachment? Short and simple answer, you don't. Okay, you don't get over your anxious attachment. You work towards healing parts of yourself, right? And you work towards retrieving parts of you that are lost, and you work towards retraining yourself and your nervous system. And for a lot of people, I tell people, if you struggle with an anxious attachment, the best thing you can do is find somebody that doesn't make you more anxious. It's funny. Somebody asked me the other day, like, how do you avoid anxiety in your relationships? And I said, I was kind of tongue in cheek, but I said, I date people that don't make me anxious. And granted, I'm not somebody that struggles with anxiety all that much. If I'm going to struggle with any negative emotion, it's going to lean a little bit more towards depressive thoughts. But when it comes to anxiety, I'm like, man, if somebody is making you really anxious, it might not be that you're incredibly anxious. It might be that they make you anxious because they're doing things that cause anxiety, So you have to kind of look at your relationships and look at your patterns, and maybe you date people that cause you to be anxious, right? And maybe you date people that are unfaithful. So of course you're going to be anxiously attached, But maybe you're just riddled with anxiety, and so you're anxious about most things in life. So naturally you're going to be anxious about your relationships and your attachment. So to me, the easiest way to start retraining that anxiety in you and to start improving your relationship, if you're already in one and you're anxiously attached, is to communicate. Okay? Tell your partner, like, your partner probably already knows, right? But letting them know, hey, I really struggle with this, and these are the things that make me anxious. And I'm not saying they're normal. I'm not saying you're the bad guy, but I'm saying when you do X, it makes me anxious. So let's just have a dialogue about it, right? Maybe the thing you do can easily be eliminated, Or maybe we just need communication around the thing you do, so I'm not left feeling anxiety all the time. And if your partner can't handle that, that's fine. They're not necessarily a monster, but they're in and of itself is an incompatibility. You shouldn't be with somebody that you can't communicate your anxieties to. You just shouldn't. And so, you know, I was talking to this woman about, she was saying, I struggle so much because I've had partners that have been unfaithful. And so when my current partner is out at the club with his boys, or he's doing a boys' night and they're out drinking, or maybe they're doing something so innocent, they're just watching a football game, I get anxious because in the past that meant my partner was probably cheating on me. And I'm like, okay, do you trust your partner now? And she's like, yeah, I do. He's a great guy. He's not somebody that would cheat on me, but that's where I go. And I said, okay, that's fine. What's wrong with saying, hey, well, first I asked, what would alleviate some of that anxiety? Would it be if he checked in every couple hours, or if he kind of gave you a rundown of what happened when he got home, or, what would help? And because it's different for everybody, right? And she said, honestly, it would just help if he texted me like once every couple hours, you know? And I'm like, great, tell him that, you know? And I said, a good guy that knows that's where you struggle and that's a pain point for you, he's going to make a little bit of effort for you. And I said, give him some grace, because he might not be used to doing that. He might think it's silly. He might think it's overkill. But if he loves you, if he cares about you, he's going to be willing to try at least, right? So maybe the first night he shoots you a text when he gets somewhere and then he kind of forgets, or his phone dies or whatever. I said, don't blow up at him. Don't assume things, but go back to that conversation and say, hey, like, again, this is a me issue, but why didn't you text me, And then give him a chance to explain, you know? Because not only are you retraining yourself, but you kind of got to train the guy, because he's probably, maybe he's been faithful his whole life and his partners have not been anxious about that. And so to him, he's like, what? You want me to text you every couple hours? Do you not trust me? Do you not believe me? Like, it just seems like a lot. And so he needs some training. But I think none of this is possible if you feel like you can't communicate with your partner and you can't be honest with them. And if you can't be honest with yourself. So, if you're anxiously attached about things, I would say first look in the mirror and try to be honest about what are the triggers? What are the things you're really anxious about? And, to really heal and really retrain your nervous system, there's probably some deeper work you need to do. Maybe there's some abandonment issues, some trust issues, and those need to be healed at their core. And it's not just about you freaking out because you haven't got a text back from your guy. It's just about some deep wounds that aren't healed yet. And, maybe that work needs to happen first. But along that journey, you have to just be able to communicate and say, hey, this is something I struggle with a little bit. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to work on these deep wounds. But in the meantime, can you meet me halfway? Can you kind of help me not be so anxious? And can you give me some grace to be anxious? Because I'm an anxious person, right? And if not, again, that's okay. It's just probably not the right person for you, But again, I would also look at the type of people you're dating. Are they causing your anxiety, or is your anxiety just omnipresent and it doesn't matter who you date, you're going to be anxious? These are good questions to ask yourself. Okay. This one can be a doozy. How do you deal with having regrets about breaking up with somebody? I think almost any breakup, unless you're ending things for just obvious blatant offenses, there's some hesitancy, there's some reluctance, there's pros and cons, and so especially if you still care about the person, if you break up with them, there's almost a natural compunction you're going to feel, because that person was so part of your life and now they're gone. So why wouldn't you feel a level of regret or remorse? Somebody you once cared about deeply, you've now put to the side. You've eliminated from your life. You've basically said, I don't want you in my life anymore. And that can feel really cruel and really hurtful. And so I think regret, a pretty immediate regret, is a normal, natural feeling, right? I do think if you broke up with them for a reason, which you obviously did, you do need to sit with it for a little bit and not just go back just because you're lonely or just because you're scared of being alone or just because you miss them. Like, of course you miss them. Missing your partner is not a sign that you should be with them, right? You're probably going to miss them. But also, I don't know each situation. Maybe you should get back with them, So I think it's helpful to take some time and say, okay, why did I really want to break up with this person, And I can look back on my own relationships, and I think the people that I kind of broke up with more than once, that we were kind of on again, off again, or whatever, I think if I'm really honest with myself, I was never fully in, right? Because the people I was fully in with, the thought of breaking up with them never crossed my mind because I was obsessed with them. I was crazy about them. The idea of losing them was so terrifying that I would never be the one to bring it up, And so, but I know there are happy relationships out there that work out, that it took some back and forth. It took some breakups. It took some uncertainty. It took, the laws of attraction working to remind them, oh man, I am crazy about this person. Now that they're gone, like, I can't live without them. But for me, like I said, the precious few that have slipped through my sad fingers, I would have done anything to be with them. I would have hitchhiked to Russia, to Siberia, and I hate the cold. But if that was my only opportunity to be with them, I would have done it. No questions asked. I'll ask later, And so the idea of constantly being in doubt and wondering if I should be with them, wondering, like, that just doesn't resonate with me. To me, I don't know, the people that I felt that true, bursting, life-giving love, there was never any doubt. Problem was, there was obviously doubt on their end. And so, as much as I romanticize that love and those feelings that I had that were very, very real to me, there was obviously some doubt on their end. And that's so heartbreaking, because when you're that certain about somebody and you feel that good with them and you feel that alive with them, it's so painful to think that they might not feel the same way, right? Even if they love you back and they like you a ton and they really love so many things about you, even if their reasons for not wanting to be with you are pretty darn good, or they just logistically they don't make sense, or logically they don't make sense, or the timing is off, or any of these non-offensive offenses, it still is agonizing to think about. to think I would do anything to be with this person, and they, given the option, have just chosen quite easily no. They've quite easily chosen that this isn't the person I want to be with. And for me, I'd give everything up to be with them. That's the kind of heartache that is really hard to get over. But I will attest to something in this Valentine's Day season. I will attest that kind of heartbreak can still be overcome, you know. And listen, I don't want to pulverize a dead horse, because that's disrespectful. But you know, the last person that I dated that I cared about deeply and who I loved, that breakup rattled me. It really did. It really skewed with my existence. It did something dark and menacing to my brain and to my heart. And when I was in the throes of it, it was really hard to see an exit. It was really hard to see any light. And as time progressed, in the linear way that it does, my heart started to heal. And the crazy thing about your heart healing is it's imperceptible at first. You don't necessarily wake up and think, oh, I feel a tiny bit better than I did yesterday, or I feel just a skosh better than I did 3 weeks ago. It wasn't always like that. You know, there were months where I just felt like there was cement poured on me, and there was fog all around me. And I still managed to find joy in things. I still managed to live my life and pursue things and to find little corners of happiness, you know. But those they felt like dead ends. It felt like, oh, sweet, there's happiness over here, but that's just a dead end. Oh, but you know, I go around the corner, I sneak into this alcove. Oh, there's some happiness here, but again, it's another dead end, you know. And I want this wide open field of endless felicity and joy. And for a while, I'm just like, I don't know if I'll get there again. Knowing that this person exists, they're out there, and they don't want to be with me, despite what we had, which I thought was pure magic. I thought it was something created from the gods, and now it's just been discarded and viewed as nothingness. And that was hard to get over. But you know, as days turned into months and months turned into years, my heart was doing all this work that I didn't even really know about. My heart was putting in work. And sometimes we don't give ourselves that credit. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to heal because we want answers now, and we want healing now, and we want this open meadow of beauty and jubilee. We want it now. But it's okay. You know, it's okay to live in grief and to live in mourning, to find little happiness in the corners when you can, and to kind of make your way through the maze. And I do believe eventually you come out of the maze and you find your meadow of joy. But I don't think it is this perfect, seamless, like infallible meadow, right? I think it is a meadow with hurdles and with stones and with serpents, but it's more expansive, right? The joy you can feel more richly, more deeply, and I believe it's out there. And so I'm going to keep going through the maze, and I'll hit my dead ends I'll accidentally go downstairs. I'll accidentally get locked in the cellar. But eventually I'll get out of this labyrinth and there'll be this grand opening and it'll be beautiful. But I've got to find joy in the labyrinth, you know? And I do. I find joy in these little corners, in these little shadows, these little dimly lit hallways. I find my joy. And my hope, my eternal hope, is that there is greater joy out there, and I'm looking for it. But I got to find joy along the way, or else I will live in misery. And I'm just not okay with that. I'm really just not. And I've said this before, but the reason I have such hope in life, and I wouldn't necessarily even call it optimism, because I'm not somebody that I think is routinely and habitually optimistic. I try to be a realist and I try to live in reality without being delusional or pessimistic. But I think I live in hope. And I think hope is a cousin of optimism, but I think it's hard to always see things in a positive light. But to me, it's easy to be like, you know what? This situation I'm in, it's heinous. I hate it. It sucks. I don't even want to see the positive in it, but I have hope. I have hope that I'll get out of it, that things will improve, that things will get better. And I think that's, it's just the only way that I know how to live effectively. It's the only way I know how to survive mentally. So yeah, if Valentine's Day makes you feel like you're stuck in this labyrinth of life, first of all, look around. There's so many people in there with you. You're definitely not alone. But know that, man, there's some beauty in this journey. Like, you might be stuck in this maze for a while, but you've got to find ways to experience joy within. You've got to find ways to see the light when you can. Some parts might be really poorly lit. Some parts might be full of halogen lamps, but you just keep moving forward. Because the alternative is to just sit down in your corner and cry and spoil yourself and pass away. And to me, that's a pretty pathetic exit. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to move forward. And there are times where I'll curl into a ball and I'll piss myself. But then I get up and I dry myself off. I clean myself off. And I try to move forward again. That's all I can do as a human, right? I wanted to talk about this principle that I heard the other day. I don't even know where I heard it. I feel like it could have been in a text I got, or I saw on Instagram, or I overheard it. I don't even remember. But I heard the term sacred wounds. And it made me think about my own wounds. And I think sometimes during Valentine's Day, maybe during lonely chapters of your life, your wounds can feel really fresh. They can feel reopened, And I think that's somewhat unavoidable at times, your wounds being reopened. But I think the challenge is when they're reopened and when they're nice and sutured and shut and they're healing, anywhere along that spectrum, I think it's nice to say, you know what? These wounds are sacred. These wounds made me who I am. These wounds made me stronger and smarter and wiser. They expanded my heart. They opened me up, And so to not look at our wounds as symbols of weakness or troubled memories or the reason why we struggle or the reason why we're deficient in some area. It's like, no, let me look at my wounds as sacred memorials, you know? These are epitaphs for me and my body and my memory. And let me memorialize them. Let me look at them as things that have built me up and have buoyed me up into the person I am. And to me, any other way to look at your wounds, whether they're actually physical scars or they're mental wounds, they're things that have sat with you longer than you want. Either way, looking at them with some holier eyes and looking at them as holy reminders and holy bits of you, like that's the real gift. Okay, I think the last thing I want to touch on, and I've talked about this a little bit already, but this is just anytime I do a Q&A, people ask me this. And of course, during a Valentine's Day Q&A, lots of people asked. And I want to proffer some perhaps new approaches to this, some new modalities. And it's the age-old question, how do I get over someone? And this question is maybe especially raw during this season. If you've gone through a breakup in February, Valentine's Day can be pretty violent, especially if it's the first half of February. Or even just any part of this year. The year's just started. We're just sneaking into the second month. So a breakup can feel incredibly raw. So how do you get over somebody? How do you get over somebody? There's so many things that come to mind. I think, for starters, you want to view what you had through a truthful lens. You want to view what you had and say, okay, without romanticizing, without trying to demonize my ex so I can move on faster, what did we really have? Was it beautiful? Was it meaningful? And to try to learn from that and to try to carry those things on to the next relationship, I think that's important. But I think initially I think it's hard to get over somebody if we are telling ourselves a wild tale, I think a lot of times it's easier to move on if we can make our ex out to be the problem. And sometimes they are. And we have a hard time moving on because we're just hurt or we're damaged. But when we're the ones that are jilted, when we're the ones that are left behind and jettisoned, how do you move on? You call it what it was, You say, man, I had something so amazing, something that stretched me, something that gave my soul purpose, something that helped me really step into joy because I wasn't really there before. So when you divorce from that sort of thing, you have to give yourself grace because, of course, you're in tremendous pain, right? But getting over someone, it really involves so many different things, right? It involves self-love. It involves taking care of yourself. It involves, in my opinion, community. Having people around you, having friends, having outlets, having family, having people that you can cry with, that you can share your pain with. Part of the reason why I feel like I was able to get over my ex, even though it took way longer than I wanted, part of the reason was because I felt it deeply. I mourned deeply. I mourned as if there was a death, I cried with my best friend in Chili's over sliders. There were probably tears on my sliders, which is good because they probably needed a little bit more salt. But because I was willing to do that, nothing was buried inside of me. And I think it really helps me. Like, I think the truth is, if you loved really, really deeply and that person was truly amazing and altruistic and beautiful and loving and kind and generous and all these wonderful things, it's going to be hell to get over. It's going to feel impossible, and it's going to take a while. But after the initial couple months of really intense misery, it still took me probably years to really get over this girl, but I became very, very functional very quick. I became very open to joy very quick and open to connection very quick. And that helped me survive. And so I think when you're in so much pain and you're going through a breakup, you want quick answers. You're like, how can I feel better tonight? How can I, you're searching for some sort of panacea, and they don't exist when it comes to this sort of thing. For me, I needed God. I needed my best friend. I needed other close friends. I needed connection with females. I needed support and love from my family. I needed my hobbies. I needed my passions. I needed purpose at work. I needed all these things helped me. And so there's no like, okay, here's the 5 ways to get over somebody, and if you do them, you'll be healed and you'll be over them. That's not how it works. It's the same way. Part of the reason I love this book, A Grief Observed, it's about the loss of his wife. But to me, you go through very similar things when you're brokenhearted and when you lose a relationship. In some ways, it feels worse than a death, because a death, oftentimes, there's peace around it because it's fully out of your control and there's finality to it, and it's the cycle of life. Everyone dies, but not everyone breaks up, and when someone dies, you can't see them ever again, and that's really hard. But when you break up, you can see them again. You just shouldn't, and they don't want you to see them again, and that can feel worse than a death. Maybe not a tragic, untimely death, but the grief is very similar. And so in the same way, you're not expected to like fully heal from someone dying, someone close to you, someone you loved. I don't think you should be fully expected to heal from somebody who shattered your heart. I truly think bits of my heart will always be broken. And that's okay. I think when the right person comes along, it won't feel like that anymore. I think a lot of those bits will be mended. But I think, you shatter a jar on the ground, a glass jar on the ground, shards are going to go everywhere. Bits of dust are going to fly everywhere. And you can have all the technology in the world to glue it back together, but it's always different, right? Even if you've got the main pieces, and maybe it didn't shatter into a million pieces, maybe it just shattered into, a handful, it's never going to be the same. And that's okay. There's some beauty to it. There's some wabi-sabi to it. The Japanese have this principle or philosophy that they call wabi-sabi, which means, they'll have a piece of earthenware, they'll have a pot or a clay jar or a plate that's been broken, and it's been resealed, it's been glued, it's been fixed with gold or with another precious material or something even beautiful. It doesn't have to be expensive. And wabi-sabi means that there's beauty in the broken, and that item is now even more beautiful because of what makes it different and what's caused it to repair. And so I do believe parts of my heart will just always be broken. The last girl that broke it, she did a fine job. She did really good work. And so there's bits of it that are just, they're gone forever. But I think my heart, it's crazy to say this, but I think my heart is better off. I think it comes back as a regenerated, better organ. It comes back as a better piece of me. And it might, if technology could show when a heart had been broken, if you looked at my heart, there'd be obvious signs, right? You'd be like, oh, there was a crusade on that heart. But it would also show that, but somehow that heart is bigger and that heart is stronger. And so if I had the option to take away those heartbreaks from my life, I wouldn't. Which is crazy to think about, because when you're in them, you're like, I would rather experience anything else. But some time removed, I'm like, man, my heart owes these women a thank you, and that's part of the healing, right? I couldn't have said that with any authenticity even 8 months ago. But man, the heart is so resilient. And I know sometimes we're sick of being resilient. We're like, dude, I've been resilient for years. I'm over this. I want to quit now. Like, being resilient, being tenacious, being tough, being a go-getter, all this stuff, I'm just sick of it. I just want to rest. I just want to I want a respite. I want my prize. I want to get to this meadow of joy that exists out there somewhere. I understand that, but I think if you're tired of being resilient, take a break from your resiliency. Take a week, take a month, and just love yourself. Just be with yourself. Don't worry about being resilient. Don't worry about being tough, because it'll come back. You can go get it again, so you can take a break from resiliency if you need to. I just don't take a break from hope. Hope is my guy. Hope is like my seeing eye dog, and the dog might get curious and kind of run away, but I need that dog. So if it kind of scurries off, I'm going to go find it, and I'll be fairly worthless because I'm blind, but I'm going to find that dog again, and that's the only way I'm going to do it. It's the only way I know how. I feel like I gotta share my love with you people, with my listeners. By the time this episode comes out, I'll probably have hit the 200,000 followers milepost on Instagram, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal. It's cool, it's novel, it feels special. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal, but to me, it feels really, really special, and it's hard to wrap my brain around, and so I'm just so grateful. And I was texting a friend today about this, but I said, if we don't have gratitude in life, I think the natural consequence is misery. And so to counteract misery, I'm going to continue being grateful. And so I'm not always grateful, not for every moment, not for every act, not for every person, but that's got to be my default setting. I go back to time and time again. If I'm struggling, if I'm feeling miserable, if I'm feeling self-pity, I got to return to gratitude. And so I just love you guys so much, and I appreciate you riding with me. And, I've even had people message me that have said, hey, I love your stuff, but I had to unfollow you because it's whatever. It hits too close to home, or it's too sappy, or it's too sad, or I don't want to hear that anymore. Or it was great when I was going through a breakup, but I don't want to hear it anymore. And that's fine. I'm grateful you were with me when you were. And I hope that it was helpful for a moment, you know. So I love you guys, and we'll see you soon.